Hello, on today's lesson, we're going to state the domain and range of each graph using interval notation and also identify the key attributes for the given graphs. So the first one, I can see that it has an open circle and it extends up, and with the arrow, it's going to keep on going and going and it will never stop. It has no end. There's also a little section right here on below, open circle versus a closed circle. So the point does exist here. The point does not exist here and the point does exist there for sure. So let's find the domain. The domain, we're looking for the x values, and we're going to read the graph from left to right. So let's look at that graph. So I'm going to use the paper clip so it can help me understand where my picture begins. So there's no picture here, nothing until you approach this number. This x value is at -4, right here. So at -4, it does not exist. So nothing here. I'm gonna make sure I dash it so I won't forget that at -4, the x value does not exist. And I keep going, I hit a graph at some point, so there's an x value that hits it. But on this graph, at 2, when x is 2, it does not exist in this graph. So you want to put an open circle, but at the same time, we realize that in this other graph, it does exist. So it overpowers the overpowers the open circle. So the 2 is being used in this graph. So it keeps on going on and on and on. So it goes up to positive infinity. So when I'm writing the notation on this, again, using interval notation, the lowest x value is -4, and that is an open circle. So we use the parentheses, comma, to positive infinity, and again, that is your open parentheses because it doesn't stop. The range, it is from the bottom all the way to the top. So we're going to find all the y values that the function uses. So going from the bottom all the way to the top, I begin here, and that is an open circle. So the point at -7 does not exist for this graph. And keep going. Oh, there is a ending piece right here. So this one is at -5. And that does have a closed circle, so that point does exist. So I'm going to place a solid line. There's a huge gap here, and it reaches another section. So I want to make sure that I have this little notation here. -7, and this is -4. These are all my y values. And then it begins again here at when y is 0. Well, this is an open circle, so I'm going to dash my picture. And I'm going to extend it all the way. Well, there's an arrow. This never stops, and it keeps on going and going and going. So these y values have an arrow here, and that will extend to positive infinity. So we actually have 2 locations of your range. So the first one is at -7. That is an open circle, and it reaches -4. That is also noted with a bracket to show that it's a closed circle. But we were having another piece, or you have a graph that begins at 0, but it's an open circle, it doesn't exist, and it extends all the way to positive infinity. Okay, number 2, same thing, looking for the domain. We're going to read our graph from left to right. So grab my paper clip here, and I'm going to move my paper clip. I also noticed that this image has an arrow. So this arrow is going to extend, going on forever and ever. So there's no beginning point. I have an arrow here. So I can't start anywhere. But my picture ends right here when x is -2. And that is an open circle. So I'm going to note it with a dashed line when x is -2. So at the very beginning, arrow, but it does end at -2. So let's mark that right now. So So we have an arrow, which is in the negative x value. There goes the bell. And it extends all the way to -2. And that is an open circle, so we put parentheses on there. We're going to jump to the next section, or this piece. So our picture is beginning at 1, and that is a closed circle. So I don't want to forget that, so I'm going to put a little solid line. And it continues until it stops right here of when the x value is 5, and that is a closed circle as well. Make a little line here. So this is where the x values begin. 1 at the arrow, and it extends to -2. Then it stops from 1 all the way to 5. At 1, it is a closed circle, so you're going to put a bracket. And then at 5, it is a closed circle, so we're going to put a bracket. And the range is from the bottom up. So I'm going to look for my y values. The bottom of the picture, I have an arrow. So I do not have a starting point. And if I keep going, I stop right here for this graph, and that is an open circle, but I notice that on the other side, it does exist. That is a closed circle. So the point exists here, so I can continue going. There's no gap. And I reach all the way to the highest part of the graph, which is at 4. And that is a closed circle. So I don't have a starting, but I do have an ending piece. Your picture is somewhere in between the arrow and the 4. So I'm going to write that. The arrow is going to keep going all the way to the negative y values, and it stops when your y value is at 4. That is a closed circle. Okay, our next one, we have number 3. We have 2 pieces as well. Let's look for the domain. I'm looking for the x value. So we're going to go from left to right. There's my picture. And my picture begins at -3. And that is an open circle. So the point does not exist when x is -3. And it continues on, and it stops right here at -1. Okay, and that's an open circle as well. Okay, I'm going to write that down at -1. So at -3, it is an open circle, so it's parentheses, -1, open circle, and there's a gap right here. So we're going to do or. It begins when x is 0. And that is a solid point, so the point does exist when x is 0. So these are all the x's. So your picture is somewhere between this, and I'm jumping the gun over here, so now this is 0. And this arrow keeps on going on and on and on and on. And so the x values that are being used are positive x values. Not necessarily because the arrow is going up, because it's using all of the x values that are going to the right. So it has an arrow on this side. So your x values would be from 0, and that is a closed circle, and it goes to positive infinity, which is a parentheses. Range is from the bottom up. So you start at the very bottom, and you have -4. And at -4, that is a closed circle, so I'm going to put a solid line at -4. So you're looking for all the y values. You keep going up and up and up and up. Yes, this picture stops here, but this line here, this function is going on and on. So you're using those y values, and because of this one, those are being used. So this continues on going to positive infinity. So your picture is somewhere between the -4 and the positive infinity. At -4, it is a closed circle. Infinities are always parentheses. Okay, great. Our next part, look at the image that we have here. We're going to be finding the domain and range and determine the x and y intercepts of this image, this function. We're going to be using interval notation as well. By looking at those, there's different pieces that we have here, different changes that are occurring. All right, let's look at the domain. The domain are all your x values. So where does your picture begin using your x values? So these are your x right here, and this is your y axis. This is your origin. So your picture begins right here, and that is a closed circle. So I'm going to make a solid line so I won't forget when x is -4. And my picture, I'm using all of these x values, I'm using all of these x values, and I stop using my x value until we reach 3, and that is a closed circle. So somewhere between the -4 and the 3 is your image. Somewhere around here, between the -4 and the 3 is your image. So I'm going to write down -4, that was a closed circle, comma, and 3, and that was also a closed circle. Okay, the range, you're going to go from the bottom up. So looking at the lowest part of your graph, it's right here at -1, and that is a closed circle. And you would think you want to stop here, but then you can't chop this piece off. So you have to extend it, you extend it all the way till you get to the very top of your image. And that in itself is also a closed circle at 3. So your image is somewhere between the -1 and the 3, somewhere in here. Basically trapping that figure. So the lowest y value is a -1, and that was a closed circle. And the highest y value is a 3, and that was also a closed circle. So what are the intercepts? Intercepts are where it crosses the x-axis. So we're going to look for where it touches the x-axis. So I can see that this is my x, and the locations would be this one and that one. It's the only places that I see. Another name could be zeros. So my answer is -1 and at 1, 0. Sometimes you see the notation for your x or x-intercepts to be at -1, comma 1, but making it with a little brace to form a set. Okay, and the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis, which is down here. This is where your picture crosses the y-axis when y is -1. So 0, -1. Make sure again that when you're looking for your x-intercept, the y's are 0. So when you're looking for the y-intercept, the x values are 0. You may also see it as y equals the set of just simply -1. That's another notation. Okay, this ends part 1.